Hello and welcome. My name is John McNally and I will assist with the GoToWebinar portion of today's meeting. Before we start, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items so the virtual audience members know how to participate. Your microphones have been muted to reduce background noise. There will be specific times during this meeting when audience members can participate. The first way is by typing your question into the questions section at the bottom of the GoToWebinar interface. Those items will be read into the record by a meeting organizer at the appropriate time. The second way is by clicking on the raise hand icon indicating that you wish to speak. A meeting organizer will announce the next speaker at the appropriate time and unmute their audio, at which time they should state their name and address for the record. Please minimize any sources of background noise and speak clearly into your microphone during your allotted time. I will now turn control over to Amanda Radigan, who will be moderating today's meeting.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us both in person and virtually. We'll be discussing Complete Streets mobility today. The agenda will be as follows. We are going to, John, if you could just scroll down, thank you. We are going to do a PowerPoint of the mobility plan and the technical report that are in draft form. And then we will be taking public comment from people both in person and virtually. And then we can adjourn. The PowerPoint is split up into two sections. The first part will be given by Jonathan Paul. And he can start and he'll give a brief introduction of himself as well.
All righty. Thank you all very much. Do I need to pull this up here?
No, John, if you could please pull up the PowerPoint.
All right, well, thank you for joining us this evening. For those members of the audience that are here today and then those that are joining us virtually. What we are presenting today is the City of Boynton Beach's Complete Street Mobility Plan and Mobility Fee. So a little about myself. I've been doing this for 25 years now. I'm a graduate of the University of Florida up in Gainesville, and I've served a number of years for local governments as both a concurrency and an impact fee manager, and developed the first mobility plan and mobility fee in the state of Florida with Alachua County. And now I've been working in communities throughout Florida, from the Panhandle all the way down to Miami Beach, from Sarasota to St. Augustine, helping them plan for their future and also to develop a mobility fee. All right. Do this here in a sec. So the mobility plan is a vision over the next 25 years for how people are going to move about and within the city of Boynton Beach. And a mobility fee is a fee paid by new development to mitigate its traffic impact. It's not something that's assessed to existing development or existing businesses. It's not a tax. It's not a reoccurring assessment. It's a one-time assessment on new development only to help pay for their traffic impact. And essentially the mobility plan identifies the improvements within the community. The mobility fee is one funding source for that. And essentially the funding source, it also includes sales tax, special assessments, and also state and federal funds through the Palm Beach County Transportation Planning Agency. And so just some perspectives, the city of Boynton Beach, like many Sunbelt communities, principally looked at providing roadway capacity, and this is particularly true for Palm Beach County, and really made driving the easy choice. And what this community has felt, and which more and more communities across the state are dealing with right now, is they can't necessarily widen any more roads, or if they were to widen roads, it would have a negative impact on existing neighborhoods and existing businesses and the quality of life in their community. So more and more folks are starting to ask, is there a better way to plan for the movement of people? And so one of the big issues with mobility planning is addressing congestion. And some people believe traffic congestion's a problem to be solved, and others believe that it's actually a sign of prosperity that allows people to live where they want and work where they want. And that congestion somewhat of the trade-off for having that flexibility and freedom. Communities that have attempted to build their way out of congestion have found they just doesn't work. The biggest example, or one of the biggest examples in the US, is the Katy Freeway in Houston, Texas. It was promised to solve traffic, increase travel speeds, reduce delays, and make the road safer. And so they went forward and built 26 lanes with a 12-lane interstate with a bunch of feeder roads. And what they found is travel actually was worse, congestion was worse. It took more time to get anywhere on the freeway. And because there were so many lanes, the crashes increased. Sorry, I'm just having a little trouble with this. Sooner or later I'll get it. And part of the rationale for that, and part of the reason, is what's known as induced demand. You may know it better as build it and they'll come. But essentially, as soon as new capacity is provided for a roadway, it's used up. And so if you've ever gone through long bouts of traffic on Military Trail or Congress or building or widening I-95, and as soon as they're done, it's just as congested as it was beforehand, it's because people change their travel patterns and they look for the quickest and easiest way to get from point A to point B. So what ends up happening is that new capacity added is quickly consumed by new travel. And so why is the city developing a mobility fee and a mobility plan? One is to ensure that new development mitigates its impact, and that impact, the monies that they pay for that, are spent within the city of Boynton Beach. This allows the city to prioritize the improvements that are made within the community, and also allows the city to look at various partnerships. And this is particularly, we don't have a slide of it, but we've done some analyses over the years, and Palm Beach County, which currently has a roadway impact fee that they charge on new development, has collected roughly $24 million over the last 10 or 15 years within the city, and it's spent less than $1 million of that. So essentially, it's taken $23 million out of this community and spent it elsewhere. And just to give you an idea, a sidewalk probably costs about $500,000 a mile. So $24 million is about 48 miles of sidewalk, or pretty much a sidewalk on every single road within the city. And that's one of the primary reasons that the city is looking at a mobility fee, to ensure that money that's collected and paid by new development here gets spent on improvements to make it easier for the residents and businesses to get around. And so impact fees, which is what the county assesses, go to fund roads, new roads, wider roads, intersections, but that goes to add road capacity. The vast majority of the needs within the city of Boynton Beach are for bike lanes, sidewalks, trails, better transit service, access to Tri-Rail, potentially access in the future to a commuter rail service running along Brightline. But in essence, the city is looking for other ways to move people within the community other than just adding road capacity. And so the mobility plan itself involved several steps to develop it, a review of existing plans, and evaluation of the growth that's in the future, and establishment of standards to basically plan for and identify improvements within the community, the actual identification of those improvements, development of cost estimates, and then ultimately the mobility plan itself. And Amanda will touch a little bit more in detail on that plan. So really the fundamental basis of the plan is to move people, whether those people choose to walk, ride a bicycle, drive transit, use a micro-mobility device or a golf cart, or get in an Uber or a Lyft, or take a scooter around. But there's multiple ways to move people, and there's really only one way to move a car, and that's to drive it. And so as part of the analysis, we looked at a number of roadway improvements and interchange improvements, both within the 2045 long-range transportation plan, and then also within the community's plans itself. We also evaluated what's known as level of service, and this is essentially the level of congestion that's on the existing roadways today. And what we primarily found is, with the exception of 95 and the Turnpike, which are funded through either toll revenues or the federal government, the corridor with the greatest amount of congestion on it is Congress Avenue, both existing and then out into the future in 2045. But overall, conditions within the city are fairly favorable in terms of level of service. We also looked at different types of improvements that are proposed both on county roadways and on city roadways. And what we found is, for the most part, there was a few small connectivity improvements within the city, but there were really no large scale road capacity projects within the city. And the whole basis of a road impact fee is that you have a lot of road capacity that's needed. And essentially, that's not what exists within the city today. So Amanda, I'll turn this over to you and let you discuss a little bit further.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. After we look through the existing plans and their projects within our city, the second step we did was to do a land assessment. Essentially, what this assessment did is looked for groupings of active areas or destinations throughout the city and looked for them in groupings. They were identified in a few different categories. The first one was existing projects. The second one is approved or under construction. And then we had planned projects that we knew were coming down the pike. And then the conceptual stage projects. And then lastly, potential redevelopments. To orient yourself to this map, we are located right at the number 4. That is the new City Hall building. And number 8, just kind of surrounding number 4, is the Town Square development project. So from this assessment, there were 2 mobility hubs created and 3 districts. You're looking at a map of the primary mobility hub. It essentially goes along Boynton Beach Boulevard and Federal Highway, a couple of blocks in each direction. The secondary mobility hub is located on the western end of the city. This includes the mall, which is number 11, and number 12, which is a large piece of vacant property on Boynton Beach Boulevard on the western end of the county. And all of the existing newer construction shown in green, located up and down Congress Avenue. So the 3 districts that were identified, and you can see them on this map, the 2 yellow areas were the 2 mobility hubs that we just talked about. The eastern side was the primary mobility hub, and the western side is the secondary mobility hub. In addition, the 3 districts were, the first one to the north is Tri-Rail. It includes also the Brew district that is surrounding that area. And number 2 is what we call the Woolbright node. This is essentially the intersection of Woolbright and Federal Highway. It includes some new construction there. Riverwalk is being constructed at that intersection. And then number 3 is the medical district. This includes the Bethesda Hospital and some medical uses that surround that area. So the other thing we looked at as we're transitioning into complete streets and mobility is quality of service. Currently, we have a system that looks at level of service, which is only a way to measure capacity of roads. Quality of service is a different method that could be used to measure the quality of certain modes and several modes, not just cars. So what you're looking at here is how we would restructure how we look at our roadways. And it is primarily based on 2 things. One is the speed limit, and second is the location or land that it's serving. So for example, let's do quality of service level B, or QoSB, would be limited to a speed limit of 20 miles an hour. And it is applicable to locations that are local streets, residential city streets, and or minor and select collectors. So again, what's different about QoS is it also gives us a way to grade other modes, which was missing in LOS. So QoS also gives us a method to look at grading things like, if you're looking at your upper left, bike lanes or micromobility. This is based on two criteria. It'll be the width of the lane and the design of it. So for example, a 5-foot bike lane that is protected would be graded as an A. And the maximum posted speed limit would be 25 miles an hour. To your right, you'll see a method for starting to grade transit. It is based on two things also, frequency of service and then the type of transit. So an example would be if the frequency is 15 minutes and you're looking at a bus, it would be graded an A. Lastly, the bottom chart shows walking or our pedestrian facilities, things like sidewalks, would be again based on two things, the width of the facility and then the design criteria of the area. So if you are looking at, let's say, a 10-foot path and it includes street trees and on-street parking, then you'd be looking at a B-level facility. So the complete street mobility improvements. This is a map and image of some of the existing pedestrian facilities. You are looking right now at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to your left, and then to your right, the existing pedestrian facilities. Please note that this is just showing the existence of the facility, not the quality. The proposed improvements to those facilities are shown, again, this specific project, which is on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which includes the undergrounding of utilities, the addition of lights, the addition of wider sidewalks, on-street parking, and street trees. I don't remember if I said that. And what you'll see to your right is a mapping of all the proposed projects. One of note would be you'd see all these green shaded areas. They represent different neighborhoods in the city. And the darker the shade of green is represents the most need for sidewalks. So we're mapping the percent of existing sidewalks. So your darker areas have the least amount of sidewalks and probably a higher need. So here we're looking at some existing bike facilities. This is Southwest 23rd. And to your right, the existing bike paths. Here you're looking at a proposed project for Southwest 23rd. This is one of the great occasions where we have enough right-of-way or enough land to actually rebuild this road in a great way. This would include the addition of bike lanes and expanded shared use paths or a wider sidewalk. And then to your right, you'll see all of the bicycle project improvements mapped on the city's map. So next, an example of transit. What's existing right now is predominantly bus routes. We are pretty well served when you look at the routes and number of bus stops. Every black dot on this map shows an actual bus stop. We are not mapping frequency here, but just the existence of bike stops. One of the proposals for transit, on top of coordinating with PalmTran for better headways, would be the addition of a people mover or shuttle that would help connect not only our mobility hubs, but the districts also, and try and fill in the gaps between some of our destinations and some of the existing transit areas. And then the last area is blueways. This map shows the current canoe and bike launches and the proposal for the future ones shown in purple. So as you make your way through this plan, these projects are shown in a number of different ways. They are in a tabular form. There is over 30 projects proposed so far in the plan. And this map is a compiled map of the different projects proposed. It's trying to depict them in one way so you could see how the connectivity would be improved throughout the city. And back to Jonathan.
And so there are multiple steps actually to develop a mobility plan and mobility fee itself. One is a step that the city had undertaken about 2 years ago, and that was to establish the intent to adopt a mobility plan in its comprehensive plan. The staff has largely completed the mobility plan itself. We've prepared a technical report documenting the methodology for the fee. And the next phase will actually be development of an implementing ordinance to actually physically adopt the mobility plan, mobility fee. And then there are a number of steps that occur afterwards, which are largely administrative in nature. And so the mobility fee itself is fairly detailed on the technical report, about 125 pages, and it sort of just lays out all the calculations and all the bases for the fee. And essentially any fee per Florida statute is required to meet what's known as a dual rational nexus test. One, it has to be based on a need for improvements. And as the plan that you saw that Amanda showed, there are a number of improvements identified throughout the city. There's also a need for future growth, which the plan documents. And then there's a benefit. Again, this is sort of the issue with the county's current system. The benefit says that basically that those entities that pay the fee have to receive some level of mobility benefit from payment of that fee. So the county has typically collected money within the city and it's spent it elsewhere. So how that actually meets the benefit test is something that's up for debate. Under the city's proposed mobility fee, the area that you see in green is what's established as the benefit district. So any money paid within that area is spent in that area. And the overall technical report itself documents how the fee is consistent with both Florida statute and legal requirements. And so just to provide a few examples of the fee itself, today a single family resident within the city or within the county would pay $4,717 per dwelling unit. The county charges a flat rate regardless of the type of single family unit. The city is proposing a rate per square foot. So essentially, if you build a smaller home, you pay less. If you build a larger home, you'll pay more. But for a 2,000 square foot house, you would look to pay $3,840 within the city. So it's a little bit less than the county's current fee. For multifamily, it's based on the number of bedrooms. And so the city's fee would be $2,466. The county's is $2,929. And what you're seeing partially is a reflection that overall mobility improvements for sidewalks, bike lanes, transit tend to be a little less expensive than the funding for roadways. And for smaller scale residential to incentivize workforce housing and promote affordability, that same 2-bedroom unit will be $1,858. The county does not have any provisions within its ordinance and its schedule for affordable housing, but the county does actually have some other programs that somebody could apply for to help offset or pay for part of their road impact fee. But in general, the fee is fairly substantially less than the county's existing fee. See if I can go back one more. All right. And so the actual mobility fee schedule includes a number of uses that are fairly common within the city. One of which, and there's not a whole lot of industrial land in the city, but there are portions of it. So any new industrial land would essentially pay $1,370 a square foot or per 1,000 square feet. Again, that comes in a little bit less than the overall counties. So industrial and these fees also work in terms of if you were an existing industrial use and you wanted to redevelop into a multifamily or a commercial site, you would essentially get a credit for the existing development that's on the ground today. And the fee is used to actually calculate that credit or that offset for the existing development. The county office fee is $3,418. The city's fee is $2,720. The city is also proposing a local retail fee. So if you're a local business, a mom and pop sandwich shop, or a local entity, you would actually pay a fairly significantly less of an overall fee at $3,390 per 1,000 square foot versus a fee charged by the county at $8,000. And one of the important factors that these fees are lower, both because they're actually based on a plan of multimodal improvements, but there's also a requirement in Florida statute that if you adopt a fee that's lower than what it is currently today, the city and that fee would go into effect immediately upon adoption. Otherwise, you actually would need to wait 90 days per Florida statute. And then there are a number of other stipulations and requirements that the legislature has placed on local governments that have to be met. However, if your fee is lower, and in this instance, it would be replacing the county's roadway impact fee, these could be implemented upon adoption by the city. And so as we go through the next steps, there will be a review both from the community and from stakeholders of the mobility plan itself. In addition to the mobility fee technical report, there'll be a presentation before the city commission to get some feedback as well. We'll work with staff to develop what's known as an implementing ordinance. That ordinance requires 2 readings before the city commission. And then should the city commission actually elect to adopt the fee, it would go into effect immediately. Now, there are a few fees that we didn't cover, and these are what's known as an additive fee. And these address some of the high trip generating land uses, such as drive-throughs for restaurants and gas pumps for fueling stations. So they would actually pay a higher fee than what exists today. And per Florida statute, those would actually have to go into effect 90 days later. But those really target the individual components of uses that generate a lot of traffic. And with that, Amanda or I, and also several other members of city staff, are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Anyone in the audience that does have questions, you can make your way to the podium. And then after we do in-person comments, John, if you could then after that do our virtual audience. And just a reminder, if you are virtually visiting us, you would need to raise your hand and John will call on you guys one by one.
Hello, Stephen Grant, 2501 Southwest 11th Court, Boynton Beach, Florida, 33435. I want to thank you and all of the Boynton Beach staff, our consultants, for making this mobility fee plan. I'm very excited to put this in action. But I do want to know the exact numbers for the impact fees, because I don't feel that the estimation of 24 million to 1 million is entirely accurate. So let's make sure, because we have those numbers per year, get each year how much the county took and how much they spent, because I believe the county has 6 years to itemize that allocation, then 9 years to spend it. And if they're holding on money that they're supposed to return, this is a way that we can figure that out.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we have those numbers available for the city commission presentations.
Thank you. The next thing is the quality of service. I didn't see anything for 40-mile-per-hour or 45-mile-per-hour bike lanes, which is currently within the city limits. So what is that versus protected or separated versus buffered? Because I don't feel at 45 miles per hour, a buffered bike lane should be getting an A rating.
Essentially, I believe I have to go back to the slide there. What we're looking at, in essence, if you build a buffered bike lane, this is a lane that has pavement markings between the bicycle lane and the travel lane, it would result in a higher quality of service. So a B or a C, depending on the speed of travel of the roadway. If you had a protected bike lane where there was actually a raised median or a physical separation between the travel lanes and the bicycle lane, that would be an A or B. In terms of quality of service for streets, essentially what we found is the slower the speeds, the better it is for all users of the system, whether you're walking, bicycling, accessing transit. And so the slower the speed, the better the quality of service. At a certain point, once you get above 35 miles an hour, you're really talking auto-oriented, and it's not, while people can still walk and bike and access transit, it's really not conducive to those activities. So in terms of the quality of service, I'd have to
And
check.
I could bring up what was previously shown.
Okay.
So you said 40 miles per hour. Currently, there is not a rating for 40 miles per hour. The highest bike lane rating would be at 30 miles per hour, the highest speed limit on a designated bike lane road. If you are a buffered bike lane 6 feet or more, the maximum speed limit on that road would be 30 miles an hour. There are no ratings for 40.
So essentially, it would be a D or an E. It would not be an environment that's conducive for bicycles, and would not be something that would be targeted by the city. The target would be to lower the speed limit on that facility, or to provide a protected or buffered bicycle facility.
And one other note just about roadways in general and the quality of service scheme right now as it stands for roadways. The highest speed limit would be a level of service E, which is 35 miles an hour, and that is applicable to principal arterials. So the plan actually doesn't call for 40 miles an hour anywhere as a great quality of service measure.
Okay, so my concern is then on Congress Avenue and Seacrest, where it goes above the 35 miles per hour. These are our north-south roads. There is no really other way to get through the city. Federal Highway mostly is 35 miles per hour, but I would want to make sure that the mobility is taking into account how do we do that, and if it needs to be shared use path or protected, so that the bicyclists or micro mobility transportation utilizers have that ability to be on these their collector or arterial.
Those roads, I believe, would be minor arterials, and the service standards themselves provide for facilities on those roadways. But what it says is you're not going to result in an A or B environment. The reality is it's going to be a C or D. It's not going to be the most attractive to ride on, but it doesn't preclude the facility being provided.
Okay.
What it basically says is when you look at a roadway corridor, so say, take for example, the Seacrest corridor out here. Right now, I believe it's either 35 or 40 mile an hour speed limit. If in the future, at some point, there was a consideration to look at the number of lanes and to add a protected bike lane or a buffered bicycle lane and lower the speed limit, these quality of service standards really serve as your target. So we want to achieve a C on Seacrest. Well, you can do that by doing these three things: lowering the speed limit to C, providing a buffered bicycle lane, reducing the number of lanes or reducing the number of conflict points. So that's really how the quality of service standards are used, but it certainly does not preclude a facility. It just says on those higher volume roadways, it's not going to be your ideal place to ride or bicycle.
So the fact that the city of Boynton Beach is nearly all built out, there's really no expansion, so to speak, except going north. I'm sorry, not going north, going up. That this is the reason why a mobility fee is best suited for the city of Boynton Beach because we're not looking to expand greater than our current city limits. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think, if there are opportunities for the city to do some strategic annexation, I think those could be considered. But in essence, as the city infills, the primary way to move people will be multimodal, not adding road capacity. And if anything, the city will be looking for opportunities to potentially redo some of those travel lanes to add in multimodal facilities. And so if it's a state road or a county road, taking away a lane, sometimes that meets with some opposition or would require the approval of the state or the county. But in terms of city facilities, the city could certainly look at that. But this really sets the stage for the city to start planning a multimodal network focused on people and gets away from the focus on cars.
Well, thank you very much. Myself as the member, the delegate from the city of Boynton Beach to the Transportation Planning Agency for Palm Beach County, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we are very excited that the Florida statute has created separated bike lanes as part of law here in Florida, which helps the city determine and the county and the state to understand the importance of people riding bikes and not treating them as pedestrians. So very excited to move forward, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good.
My name is Barbara Reedy, 34001 Baez Bay, Boynton Beach 33436. Did I hear you correctly that you found no projects in concurrent with Palm Beach County as far as improvement on roads?
I mean, there were a few, I believe, minor and
So there were projects. That was one of the first slides that we showed. It was a purple chart that showed some FDOT improvements and only one road capacity project, which is minor. Most of the projects within the city limits right now, the construction that you see going around is the I-95 interchanges. And those are included in the FDOT plan. Besides that, there was just one, I believe, capacity project in the LRDP, which is the county plan, which was for a minor road, and that project was integrated into the mobility plan.
Okay. The reason I ask is the Forest Park neighborhood has been promised many years an improvement to the Seacrest corridor, which I believe runs from Boynton Beach Boulevard to, what is the bottom barrier? To Wilbright. So I would hope that that project can be pushed. The county, as you pointed out, owes us money, and that would be a nice place to spend it since we've been promised that.
Absolutely, and just so you know, and we couldn't touch on all the projects, of course, in this presentation, but within the plan, there are major improvements to Seacrest proposed, including bike lanes from the north boundary all the way to the south boundary of the city. So that is something that that we are pushing for in the plan.
Okay. If possible, I would like to request a paper copy of the draft, please, because you really can't see what you're talking about. So, I mean, I would be concerned that all of the schools in the city are a priority for getting sidewalks. Our Forest Park neighborhood has recently been given some sidewalks, which is excellent, but we have other schools and there's still more streets in Forest Park that could use some sidewalks.
Absolutely, and we can definitely get that to you. It is in draft form, and just to set expectations, this plan does list specific projects, but things like sidewalks are major undertakings because we know how much need there is. In this map, oh, I don't know. Yes, it's up on some of the screens.
Yeah.
On this map, you can see we've identified all of the areas that have public sidewalks, which means the city has the ability to spend money in them. So this omits things like HOAs where they're private roads. And we analyze the need. So after this plan is adopted, the next course of action for moving these projects forward would be a deeper analysis to start to prioritize projects within this larger conglomerate of sidewalk need.
Well, I just would like to make sure that schools are included. We can't tell from that teeny tiny map what is and isn't.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to point out that the speed limits are controlled by the entities that control those streets. Seacrest is a county street. We do not control the speed limit. So if the city is thinking about taking the speed limit down, they are going to find a battle, I'm afraid, because we've been trying to bring it down for quite a while.
And you raise a very good point. I mean, on the roads that are maintained by the county or the state, you have to have concurrence with those bodies. But the first step is essentially adopting a standard as part of the city's comprehensive plan that states this is where the city wants to go to. And then as you go along these corridors, and it would be a negotiation with the county, would be a negotiation with DOT. What often happens is they'll point out the concern of, oh, level of service or congestion. Well, as part of this plan, the city's level of service standard goes away and it's replaced by these quality of service standards, which promote slower speed. So one of those quote impediments to lowering the speed limit is removed from the city's comprehensive plan. So while again, it can't compel the county or state to lower it, it does give the city a much stronger basis to ask for it in the future. The city doesn't have any basis at all today to ask for it. Once this plan's adopted, it essentially becomes policy of the city commission to promote lower speeds within the city.
Okay,
And so both DOT and the county and the Transportation Planning Agency, they would all be looking at the city's comprehensive plan when they look at future roadway projects. And they'll see that level of service is no longer there. It's been replaced by quality of service and really these lower speed limits. So it gives the city another tool that it doesn't have today.
okay. Do I understand correctly that this is a fee that's going to replace the county's fee? It's not in addition to the county's fee?
It is intended to replace the county's roadway impact fee, and it is not in addition to that.
And that fee would go to the city commission to expend as they please?
Yes, it would. Well, I mean, it would go towards spending it per the mobility plan. So the projects, the sidewalks, those efforts that are identified in this plan, that's where those monies would be spent.
It's a funding mechanism. It's essentially a funding mechanism for the projects that we're outlining. So these projects will eventually be adopted into the city's CIP for how we spend money, and that plan is ultimately adopted by the city commission.
So I assume the county will be very sad to lose that money.
I mean, the county will likely fight to have some of that money set aside, but Florida statute allows local governments to adopt these fees. The county would then have to adjust its study if it wanted to be able to charge some type of fee in the city, but it would have to meet what's known as the dual rational nexus test. The biggest test for that is you have to have road projects. And as Amanda pointed out, there's one in the city. And that's really not a strong basis to have a fee. Two, and as we'll present to the city commission, you have to actually spend that money where it's collected. And the county does not have a very good track record of doing that.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Who would I request the paper copy of the draft from? Amanda or city clerk?
Either one works. You are more than welcome to email me directly.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Barbara.
Comments?
Is there anyone else in person that has any comments or questions that they would like to make? Okay, John, are there any questions from the virtual audience?
Yes, Amanda, this is John McNally. I'll start off first with a comment. The submitter is Tom Romicchio. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. The message is, hello, Mayor and Commissioners. Please consider user fees. Increasing gas tax, lobby the county for our fair share, ? The Planning and Development Board should be involved in the planning process in the future. Future transportation needs should not be tied to future development. Please take your time in creating this fee. It will send a negative message to the development community. The last statement is involve more planners, ? Maybe the Treasure Coast Regional Planning, ? And signed Tom.
I'd like to respond to it just by making one comment.
Okay, and
because
then we have another question. That was a comment. This one is a question. Will we lose travel lanes in order to have complete streets?
Okay, so I'd like to address just the first comment because I think it's important to note that this plan, once it was in a draft form, we did bring it to all of our, I'll call it planning peers and transportation planners. We held a transportation partners meeting where Treasure Coast Planning Council was present, PalmTran was present, our neighboring cities, including Delray Beach and West Palm Beach was present. So we held a regional staff meeting, sorry about that, on this topic, and we did get some great feedback from that meeting. So I thought that that's important to note that that was done before this meeting. The second question was, will we lose travel lanes? Currently, the plan does not propose any elimination of any lanes. It is working within the existing right-of-ways in order to add modes, not necessarily take away modes. So right now, no, we will not be losing travel lanes.
And just as a matter, the gas tax is something that is controlled by Palm Beach County, and does have statutory requirements. In terms of its allocation, it's also a revenue source that's actually declining as more vehicles move to electric and as higher fuel standards. The gas tax revenue is something eventually that'll probably have to be reconsidered. The mobility fee itself is actually lower than the county's roadway impact fee, and developers that pay it are likely to actually see a benefit from payment of that fee. And it also provides the city with an opportunity to directly enter into agreements with developers to essentially what's known as front end or build improvements up front as part of their overall development, and then work with that developer to offer them credit. So it actually provides developers greater incentive to work with the city, who is their primary reviewer and also the one that grants the permits, to actually develop an overall mobility plan that works best for the city. Whereas opposed to right now, that money is paid to the county and the county spends it as it deems appropriate.
Okay, I do have one additional question, and that is, can complete streets eliminate speeding in my neighborhood?
Complete Streets, I think, definitely aims to reduce speeding. Some of the projects that we have proposed are things like raised intersections, raised crosswalks, roundabouts that are all slow the flow of traffic. So it can help. I don't think I'll say it eliminates, but it's definitely working towards reducing speeding.
And one of the other key features of the multimodal quality of service based on speed limit is it provides the city's engineers with increased flexibility in terms of the width of travel lanes and how they design roadways. Current level of service standards and design speeds of roadways largely promote cars moving faster. By eliminating level of service and by adopting lower speed limits, the city would actually have greater flexibility to respond to residents' concerns. And so again, these are all tools to help the city improve overall transportation and make it safer and easier for people to walk, bicycle, and access transit.
John, are there any other questions virtually?
Amanda, I do not see any other questions posted or any other hands raised in the virtual webinar.
Okay, I did see one hand go up. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to come up to the podium.
When I speak, can I take my mask?
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, Ernest McNolly. I bought a home and live at 710 Northeast 7th Street in Boynton Beach. I think it's a fantastic location and a fantastic city. But relative to why I'm up here, it's because I'm starting to read a lot and I'm getting interested in a lot of the public meetings and what's going on. And of course, there's a lot going on in Palm Beach County and Boynton Beach. When you're talking about streets and mobility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm just wondering if the city is aware that there seems to be a very unusual developer interest in Boynton Beach, to the point where if development is going to continue the way it is and at the pace it is, every time you have some kind of meeting to deal with mobility problems, the more high density urbanization units that are allowed to be built, the more it's going to turn out that the city, the way it's laid out, really can't cope with or accommodate safe streets. I mean, if you have a lot that's 60,000 square feet and you let a condo developer come in and put 80 units there with 3 cars per unit, you know what it does to that block. I mean, everybody knows. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but the reason and my final comment is relative to safe streets and mobility. I hope that all the organizations like yours, all the boards and committees, understand that there may be people in Boynton Beach who at some point think maybe we've expanded enough and it's beautiful the way it is, and we don't want to be like Manhattan, where every block and every street is high density. And I mean, unless that's the city's goal, unless unfortunately I find that often developers come in and they pretty much dominate planning boards, zoning boards, et cetera, and they just keep building, building, and building, and density keeps going up and all the problems that go with that. So my comment is, I think in the long run, if you're talking about safe streets and mobility and speed limits and a lot of things for schools, et cetera, at some point, I think the city has to say, are we just going to keep having constant approval of high density things in Boynton Beach? Because it'll constantly put a strain on it. And thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Boynton Beach. We're happy
Thank
to have you. I will say, just as a point of comment, if you are interested and you are doing more reading in the city, we do have a redevelopment plan, a CRA redevelopment plan that I would urge you to review. It does talk about redevelopment projects, and it outlines the basis for which projects are approved within the city. It says where the city can or should or may approve additional densities, and what that new scheme looks like. That plan is publicly approved and vetted and is updated, I would say, every 5 to 7 years or so. So you might find some interesting reading in there as you get to know Boynton Beach. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns about planning or development in general, feel free to reach out to me. Are there any other questions or comments from either virtually or in person? I see John shaking his head no. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Just a note that this meeting was recorded. It will be posted on the website and a link will be available. Thank you, and we are done for today.